everyone, it's Justine, and I'm super excited to be bringing you a technique in which I created 5 cards using one stamp that I created using the A Year in Flowers 2 stamp by Gina K Designs. I'm really excited to be featuring Gina K products today, and it's the first time I'm doing a feature for her company. So what I did was I rearranged my flowers onto my cardstock in a way that was appealing to me with hardly any space in between. It took me a couple of minutes to just get everything the way I like it. However, that's okay because it's time well spent. Once I finish stamping this, I'm going to create 5 cards using this background, and you could create hundreds of cards if you really felt like it. You can stamp this as many times as you want onto different backgrounds. I'm going ahead and putting a piece of 80-pound white cardstock onto my MISTI. I'm using my creative corner to keep it in place so that I can stamp off of the cardstock. I'm using an embossing buddy to ensure that no embossing powder is going to stick anywhere onto my card panel. For time purposes, I'm going to be cutting down the steps. So essentially what I did was I grabbed my background and inked it with Versamark ink. I'm going to do this for 3 of my white backgrounds and cover all 3 with Gina K white embossing powder in super fine detail, or in fine detail. Now I'm doing this 3 times, remember. And then I did a Kraft cardstock, doing the same thing and adding white embossing powder. The last thing I did was one other white card panel, but I only stamped in Versamark ink and didn't cover it with embossing powder. I just left it alone. So I went ahead and I melted all of the card panels that I created. You can see the 3 there with the embossing powder, and the one with the Kraft with the embossing powder, and the one I created with just Versamark is off to the side. Now, I have read a ton about Gina K's inks on Stamp Junkies. People talk about them all the time and how great they are, especially these mini cubes. And I have to say, I agree. I went in with a blending technique, a little skeptical, because usually with mini inks, I find that they don't hold a ton of ink in them. And so blending, I'm usually fighting with the ink in order to get enough ink out of it. Well, I was about a brand new sponge, a brand new ink, and the ink came out of it perfectly. Look how I'm not putting you in fast motion just yet. I just wanted to show, when I'm going in a circular motion starting off the card, just how easy it is to blend these inks. They're absolutely gorgeous. So I started off with Apple Mint, and then I went in with some Lemon Drop. And all I do is I have 2 blending tools, that's it, and I change the sponge with every color. And I usually keep those in the same drawer as I keep my inks. And the reason why I like having 2 and not just 1, I mean, I wish I had 4 or 5 so I could do a whole card at once, but with 2 I can easily switch back and forth between the current color and the previous color in order to get that blend perfect. You'll see when I blend the next color that I didn't get a perfect blend and I had to go back in at the end, but overall these just spread like butter. I was super impressed with them. So now I'll speed things up a little bit, and you'll see that I just continue to go in with the new colors. This one here is tomato soup, and then I'll go in with the previous color to try and blend the 2 colors in between. I didn't get the best blend between that one, but when I went back in later with a little bit more ink, it was no problem. I then went on to Passionate Pink, and lastly I went on with Ocean Mist. Absolutely gorgeous. I loved the way everything blended. It blended so nicely. But I did decide to go back in with that Lemon Drop and the tomato soup a little bit to get less of a harsher line, and I think it worked just fine. Then I decided to move on, and I wanted to do a completely different background here, and I wanted to try a little bit of watercoloring. Now I'm just using Gina K's regular paper and not watercolor paper, so I want to make sure that I'm not laying down a ton of color because it's going to warp my cardstock. In order to ensure that I wasn't going to put down a whole bunch of color, I started off with my Zig markers as a dry marker. So all I'm doing is going in quick and I'm adding different layers of Zig markers. I only have the 12 pack. I don't have a massive pack of these or a lot of colors. So when it comes to blending, I do things like light green and dark green, orange and yellow, pink and purple, and I just spread them out with a water brush. It takes relatively 0 time and definitely not a lot of talent. It was super easy to do, and I love this soft, fun spring background. Now I would recommend using embossing powder because it helps you contain that watercolor. And now I have this super gorgeous background that I really love. Now remember that panel that we did where we didn't put any embossing powder or melt any embossing powder on it? All we did was stamp in Versamark ink? Well, this is going to do a really fun resist technique that is slightly subtler than the background blending technique. So I'm going to go over this with my Passionate Pink and my blending tool. Now because I've already shown this technique with multiple colors, I'm going to speed you up. In total, in real time, it took me only a minute and a half to do this background. And you can see the subtle resist that the Versamark ink versus the embossing has. So you can see the embossing with the vibrant white, and you can see the Versamark with a really subtle background. Now here's a coloring medium I haven't taken out in a long time. These are my Inktense pencils. They're from Derwent, and I have the 36 pack. They're really cool because they're watercolor pencil crayons, so all you need to do is put a little bit of color in the center of the flowers, and then I went in and added a bit of white for just a special touch, and you grab a water brush and you just pull the ink outward. So you don't add a ton of water, and you can do this on regular cardstock. You don't have to worry about watercolor cardstock. This is just a really fun technique because you get a lot of control with your watercolor. So you can create watercolor masterpieces without really having to worry about your colors going all over the place. Just make sure that you give a couple of quick sweeps of your brush between colors so that it doesn't get all contaminated. So I'm just going through, and again you can see just how little of the pigment from the Inktense pencils goes such a long way. And if you add more, you could make it more vibrant, and if you add less, you can make it more subtle. It's really up to you. Just give a chance to play with it. They're super fun, and they create really pretty backgrounds as well with next to no effort. As you can see, I love watercoloring, but I cheat my way through it because I'm really not good at using actual watercolor paints. Now I'm done all my backgrounds. The Kraft with the pencil crayons, just plain white embossed. I've got the pink with the Versamark ink, the blended background, and the watercolor background. Now the reason why I kept one of them with nothing is I am going to do a technique in which I use a rectangle die, and I'm going to put it and cut both of these cards at the same time together. So usually most thin dies like this will cut through 2 pieces of normal standard cardstock. The cardstock that I'm using is 80 pound anyway, so it's not very thick. So I'm lining up both of them. One of them has the embossed flowers on the background and the other has the pink blended one. And I'm cutting them together so that I get the exact same shape cut in the exact same spot on both pieces of cardstock. So I'm running it through my Big Shot machine here, and it is a little bit thicker than usual, so you might have a little bit of resistance when you're putting it through your machine, but overall it shouldn't be overwhelming. Once you have all those ready, you have your 2 frames and your 2 pieces cut out from the middle, and I'm going to change them and put them in with each other to make some really interesting cards. So there are all my 5 backgrounds ready to go on some card bases. I have my card bases all here ready to go. I'm using 1 Kraft and 4 white ones, and I'm using GKD Cardstock in Kraft and white, but I'm using the heavier cardstock this time. And I am putting all of my card panels on top of my card bases so that they have a nice little frame around them when I'm finished. For the 2 frame ones, I just wanted to show you how I'm doing them. I'm putting in the pink frame and then the white frame on the other card, and then I'm putting the center of the opposite piece I cut out in the center to give it a little bit more of a fun detail. Now these cards here, I want to have them as spare cards, and spare cards are those cards I need last minute. So what I'm doing is I'm stamping in Versamark ink the 4U stamp, which comes with the Year of Flowers 2 stamp, and I'm going to cover them with some white embossing powder. That way, if I have such a simple sentiment, I can go in for last minute things and put a happy birthday stamp on the inside, a thank you stamp on the inside, a sympathy quote on the inside, whatever I like, so all these cards could be used for any occasion, and all I would have to do is take 5 seconds to stamp a sentiment in the inside, and they're good for that occasion that I need it for. I love having these type of cards on hand, and they're super handy. If you happen to get white embossing powder on your black cardstock, which happens to a lot of us, you can remove it with a paintbrush, a dry paintbrush, of course. Also, if that happens, you could use a Tombow Eraser. This is a sand eraser, so it won't erase your pencil marks, I don't think. But if you go in, it'll erase extra pieces of embossing powder that might have got stuck on your cardstock. And it will also erase and sand off if you got a little bit of ink on your cardstock as well. It's super handy. The last thing I'm going to do is to put some 3D foam tape on the back and add these to my card. Now in total, these 5 cards took me about 40 minutes, so less than 10 minutes a card. That includes coming up with the idea, so they were really quick and easy, and I hope you enjoyed the techniques that I showed in this video. I don't show any embellishing because I feel like embellishing is just your thing. If you like to embellish with nouveau dots, sequins, thread, if you like to embellish with different types of crystals or enamel dots, it's completely up to you. So here's a final look at all 5 of the cards that I created, and remember I can stamp any sentiment in the inside of the card to make them for any occasion. Here's a final look at my card with all of the embellishments. I hope you enjoyed this card tutorial, and don't forget that my supply lists are always listed in the video description as well as on my blog, and you can check out any of the links for the supplies that I use. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a great day.